Earth was a place of unimaginable chaos, a planet where survival was not a guarantee. For millennia, it had been a world constantly on the brink of disaster. Its environment was harsh, unforgiving, and filled with dangers at every turn. Volcanoes erupted with fury, earthquakes shook the very foundation of the land, and deadly storms ravaged entire cities. It was a world constantly at war, not just between its inhabitants, but also against the very forces of nature. The galaxy had long since written off humanity as a species destined for extinction. The inhabitants of Earth, however, were far more resilient than anyone could have imagined. The planet was known to other species across the galaxy as the planet of fire and blood, a fitting title for a world where survival meant living in constant peril. To those who knew of Earth, it was a place where hope was in short supply, and death was always close by. Yet, despite the endless struggles, humanity had managed to persist. The planet had borne witness to countless calamities, but still, humans endured. The alien leaders of the galaxy mocked humanity's constant fight for survival, believing that the human race would eventually falter and fade into the history books, another extinct species to be forgotten by time. Little did they know, Earth's very nature was shaping humans into something much more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. Deep within Earth's heart, a powerful group of humans was working in secret, driven by a singular goal: to escape the lethal planet that had birthed them. These individuals were not the typical survivors fighting to protect their homes from the devastation around them. No, they were the descendants of those who had sought something greater, something beyond mere survival. Over the centuries, their ancestors had accumulated knowledge passed down from ancient civilizations, long buried and forgotten. Now this knowledge was being uncovered and used to unlock a mysterious force hidden beneath the Earth's surface. The humans who had uncovered the secrets of Earth's ancient past were not ordinary scientists or engineers. They were explorers at heart, driven by the need to push beyond the limits of what was known. They had discovered something remarkable buried deep beneath the planet. An ancient starship, hidden for centuries, long before humanity had even taken its first steps into space. It was a vessel unlike any other, powered by technology so advanced that it seemed like magic to anyone who encountered it. But it was not just the ship that fascinated these explorers. It was the message that came with it. A warning, a story of a race of beings who had once thrived on Earth, but had left after realizing that the planet was destined for destruction. These ancient beings had left behind a blueprint for survival, a plan to escape the dying world, hidden away for someone worthy to find. The discovery sent ripples of excitement through this small group of humans. They began to decode the ancient texts and blueprints, piece by piece, unlocking the secrets of the starship and its power. It became clear that this ship, this technology, was humanity's key to survival. But it would not be easy. The technology was not designed for the weak. It would take every ounce of knowledge, every bit of ingenuity, and every ounce of courage to activate the ship and escape the Earth that had almost destroyed them. Word of the humans' discovery began to spread beyond the small group of scientists, and soon the galaxy's leaders, who had long dismissed Earth as a dying planet, began to hear whispers of humanity's hidden strength. The distant races of the galaxy watched with growing concern as humanity took its first steps toward the stars. They had always thought of humans as primitive, barely able to survive the planet they called home. But now, they were seeing something different. The humans were using their ancient technology to construct ships capable of leaving Earth and traveling to distant stars. The galaxy, once so certain of humanity's inevitable demise, now faced the possibility of an uprising. The first ship left Earth's atmosphere under the cover of darkness, its sleek form barely visible against the backdrop of the night sky. Inside the ship were humans who had spent years preparing for this moment. Their hands trembled as they activated the ancient systems that would propel them beyond Earth's stratosphere. But their resolve was strong. They were not just escaping their homeworld. They were making a statement to the galaxy. They were not weak, not primitive, not a species that could be easily dismissed. They were humans, and they had learned to survive where no other species could. The leaders of the galaxy, who had been watching from afar, could not believe their eyes. They had expected the human attempt at space travel to fail. After all, Earth was a planet of fire and blood. Its environment was too unstable, its people too scattered and divided. But as the ship disappeared into the dark abyss of space, it became clear that humanity had proven them wrong. The first wave of humans had succeeded in escaping Earth, and they were headed for parts unknown. This moment marked a turning point in the galaxy's history. The galaxy's leaders, once confident in their superiority, began to fear what humanity might do next. They had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit, the will to survive against all odds. The humans who had escaped Earth were not just running from danger. They were running towards something greater. They were determined to prove that humanity had a place among the stars, a place where they could build a future free from the constant fear of extinction. As the fleet of ships, all powered by the ancient technology, began to assemble, humanity's true intentions became clear. They were not seeking refuge. They were seeking to conquer, to create a new home among the stars, and to show the galaxy that they were no longer the weak, helpless species they had once been. Earth had shaped them into warriors, survivors, and now they were ready to take their place in the cosmos. Back on Earth, the ground trembled as another volcanic eruption tore through the planet's surface. The world continued to burn, but the humans who had escaped had already begun their journey to the stars. Earth, the planet of fire and blood, would soon be nothing more than a memory. The galaxy would never again look at humanity with the same contempt. No longer just a struggling species fighting for survival, humanity was now a force to be reckoned with, and in the stars, they would carve out their destiny. The leaders of the galaxy could only watch in stunned silence as the fleet of human ships sailed into the unknown, leaving behind the ashes of the planet that had once been their home. They knew that the universe would never be the same again. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and nothing could stop them now. In the heart of Earth's most dangerous and unexplored regions, beneath the thickest layers of volcanic rock, a group of humans had uncovered something unimaginable. For centuries, Earth had been known as a planet of fire and blood, constantly ravaged by disasters, wars, and the brutal forces of nature. Yet within this turmoil, a small band of scientists and explorers had stumbled upon a secret buried deep in the planet's crust, hidden away from all eyes for millennia. They were standing on the threshold of an ancient mystery, one that had the potential to change the fate of humanity forever. The discovery came by accident. While conducting routine research in one of Earth's most volatile volcanic zones, the team uncovered an underground chamber, sealed off from the outside world for countless years. The walls of the chamber were etched with symbols that no one had ever seen before, markings that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The explorers, initially unsure of what they had found, worked tirelessly to decipher the symbols. What they didn't know was that these symbols were not just a record of history. They were a map leading to a technology far beyond anything humans had ever imagined. As they dug deeper, they found something even more astonishing: a massive, dormant starship buried deep within the rock. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its design was sleek, almost alien, with metallic surfaces that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of their torches. The ship was enormous, larger than anything that had ever been built by human hands. But it wasn't just the ship that stunned them. It was the energy that radiated from it. The very air around the ship seemed charged with an unexplainable force, as if the ship itself was alive, waiting to awaken after centuries of slumber. With great caution, the explorers began to study the ship, slowly unlocking its secrets. But as they worked, strange things began to happen. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that this wasn't just an ordinary ship. It was a relic of an ancient civilization, one that had once ruled the Earth long before humanity had even appeared. The ship was powered by technology so advanced that it defied every known law of physics. Its engines, still intact despite the passage of time, seemed to be fueled by an unknown energy source that could take humanity across the stars. But the most intriguing discovery came when they opened the central chamber of the ship. Inside, they found a set of ancient texts written in a language that no human had ever spoken. These texts, however, were not just any records. They were instructions, written by the ancient beings who had built the ship. They spoke of a time when Earth would be on the brink of destruction, when its people would face extinction, and when only those with the knowledge of the ancients could escape the planet's inevitable demise. The texts detailed how to activate the starship and use it to reach faraway worlds, a technology so powerful that it could reshape the future of humanity. But there was one catch. Only those who could understand the full meaning of the texts would be able to unlock the ship's power. And there was something else, something hidden in the depths of the texts that filled the explorers with unease. It spoke of a price, a cost that would have to be paid for the knowledge to be revealed. The explorers were torn. They had found the key to humanity's survival, the very means to escape the dying planet. But they could not ignore the warnings embedded in the ancient texts. There was a dark secret buried within the ship, a secret that had been hidden for a reason. The more they studied, the more they began to understand that activating the ship's power might not only change humanity's destiny, it could also awaken something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The tension within the group grew as they debated what to do next. Some of them wanted to proceed, convinced that they had uncovered the answer to saving humanity. Others were more cautious, afraid of what might happen if they unleashed the full power of the ship. The leader of the group, Dr. Elias Hawk, a brilliant scientist with a deep understanding of ancient cultures, was especially concerned. He believed that the ship's creators had left these warnings for a reason, and that tampering with such powerful technology could bring disastrous consequences. But the others, driven by desperation and the looming threat of Earth's destruction, were eager to move forward. One night, as the team worked late into the chamber, an unexpected event occurred. The starship began to hum, its metal surfaces glowing faintly. It was as if the ship had sensed the explorers' presence, as if it was awakening after centuries of silence. The ancient texts seemed to pulse with energy, their meaning becoming clearer with every passing moment. The explorers were on the verge of unlocking the ship's power, but in doing so, they realized they had also awakened something else, something far older, far more dangerous. It was then that the first sign of the ancient beings' true intentions became clear. The ship's systems began to malfunction, as if the technology itself was resisting the explorers' attempts to unlock its secrets. Strange, unexplainable phenomena began to occur. Shadows moved on their own, whispers filled the air, and the temperature in the chamber dropped to freezing levels. Something was watching them, something that had been lying dormant for millennia, waiting for its time to come. The explorers, now terrified, realized that they had made a grave mistake. The price for unlocking the ship's power had already begun to manifest, and they could not stop it. In the days that followed, the team's once confident and determined demeanor shifted to one of fear and uncertainty. The more they tried to activate the ship, the more the strange occurrences escalated. Equipment malfunctioned, communications were cut off, and some of the team members began to disappear without a trace. It was as though the ancient beings who had built the ship were trying to reclaim what had once been theirs, punishing those who dared disturb the long-forgotten relic. But Dr. Hawk, determined to see through the mystery, refused to give up. He believed that humanity's future depended on the ship, and he was willing to face whatever horrors awaited to unlock its secrets. He delved deeper into the texts, piecing together the final instructions that would allow them to harness the ship's power. It was clear now that the ancients had left behind this technology not to save humanity, but to control it. The ship was not just a means of escape, it was a weapon, one capable of reshaping entire galaxies. And in unlocking its secrets, the explorers had unwittingly set in motion a chain of events that would bring humanity face to face with the very forces that had once ruled the Earth. As the ship's systems began to power up once again, The explorers realized that they had only just begun to understand the full scope of what they had uncovered. The ancient beings had left their mark on Earth, and now their legacy would shape humanity's future in ways they could never have predicted. The secrets of the ancients were not just a means of escape. They were a key to a new and terrifying era, one where humanity would have to face the unknown, and possibly a far darker fate than they could have ever imagined. In the heart of the galaxy, there was a planet that had long been forgotten by the universe. Once a thriving world, it now stood as a quiet, desolate place, shrouded in mystery. The planet, known only as Veros, had been abandoned by its inhabitants centuries ago, leaving behind only ruins and the remnants of a civilization that no one could remember. The world was said to be cursed, a place where shadows roamed and whispered among the crumbling buildings, waiting for something or someone to disturb the silence. For years, it remained untouched, a forgotten relic of the past. But that was about to change. A group of explorers, driven by curiosity and the promise of ancient knowledge, arrived on Veros. They had heard the rumors, whispers of strange occurrences, inexplicable disappearances, and an unnatural darkness that seemed to cling to the planet. But they were undeterred. They believed that within the ruins lay the answers to questions that had long gone unanswered. The team, composed of scientists, archaeologists, and adventurers, landed on the planet's surface with a sense of excitement and trepidation. Little did they know that they were about to awaken something that had been dormant for far too long. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the team quickly realized that something was wrong. The air was thick with an oppressive stillness, and the landscape seemed to distort before their eyes. The buildings, once magnificent, now stood like hollow shells, their walls scarred and broken. There were no signs of life, no animals, no plants, not even the faintest trace of wind. But it wasn't the emptiness that unnerved them. It was the feeling that something was watching them, a sense of being followed, of unseen eyes tracking their every movement. It was as if the planet itself was alive, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite the growing unease, the team pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets buried within the ruins. As they explored deeper into the city's heart, they stumbled upon something they had not expected, a massive underground structure, hidden beneath layers of rock and earth. The entrance was concealed, almost as if someone, or something, wanted it to remain undisturbed. But the explorers, driven by the desire to uncover the truth, forced their way inside. The underground structure was unlike anything they had ever seen. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, and the air was thick with an ancient energy that hummed beneath their feet. The deeper they went, the more they felt the weight of the place. It was as if they had entered a tomb, one that had been sealed away for centuries. And yet, the sense of unease only grew stronger. There was a darkness here, one that seemed to stir with each step they took. As the explorers ventured further into the depths of the structure, they began to notice something unsettling. Shadows moved along the walls, flickering at the edge of their vision, disappearing whenever they turned their heads. At first, they dismissed it as a trick of the light, the result of their equipment malfunctioning, or the strange energy that seemed to permeate the air. But as time went on, the shadows grew bolder, creeping closer to them, always just out of sight, but never far enough to ignore. It was as if the shadows were alive, moving with purpose, waiting for something. One of the team members, Dr. Ilara Hayes, a seasoned archaeologist, was the first to truly understand the danger they were in. She had always been the skeptic, the one who refused to believe in superstition or ancient myths. But as they ventured deeper into the structure, she began to realize that what they were dealing with was far beyond anything she could. All part of a long-forgotten history, one that spoke of an ancient race who had once ruled the planet, a race that had harnessed dark powers, powers that should have been left buried. It was then that they found it, the central chamber, hidden deep within the structure. The door, made of a material unlike anything they had encountered, creaked open with an eerie sound. Inside, they found an altar surrounded by strange artifacts and relics, each one more unsettling than the last. But what caught their attention was the figure standing in the center of the room, a tall, imposing statue, its face obscured by a cloak of shadow. It was as if the statue was watching them, its eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, her heart racing as she approached the statue. She could feel the darkness growing stronger, wrapping around her, suffocating her thoughts. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, feeding off her fear. The closer she got, the more she could sense the presence of something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for centuries to be unleashed. The other explorers, too, felt it, a growing sense of dread that seemed to tighten around their chests. And then, without warning, the shadows moved. They swirled around the room, darting from corner to corner, their movements fast and erratic. The explorers screamed in panic as they tried to escape, but the shadows seemed to follow them, wrapping around their limbs, pulling them back into the darkness. One by one, the team members were dragged into the depths, their cries echoing through the chamber. Dr. Hayes, horrified, watched as her comrades were consumed by the shadows, their forms disappearing into the abyss. But just as she thought it was over, something extraordinary happened. The statue, which had once been still and lifeless, began to shift. The cloak of shadow that had obscured its face dissolved, revealing a pair of glowing eyes, eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul. The statue was not just a statue. It was the vessel of an ancient being, one that had been trapped in the depths of the planet for centuries. And now, it was waking up. Dr. Hayes, trembling with fear, knew that she had to act quickly. The being, now fully awakened, was more powerful than anything she had ever encountered. She could feel its presence in her mind, its whispers filling her thoughts, urging her to succumb to its power. But she fought back, using every ounce of strength and willpower she had left. She reached for the nearest artifact, a small crystal embedded in the altar, and shattered it against the ground. The moment the crystal broke, a wave of energy surged through the chamber, pushing the shadows back and forcing the ancient being to retreat. The statue collapsed, its form crumbling into dust as the darkness began to dissipate. The shadows, once so powerful, were now gone, leaving only the silence of the chamber behind. Dr. Hayes, exhausted and trembling, knew that she had just narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. The shadows had stirred, and for a moment, it seemed like they would consume everything. But she had stopped them, at least for now. As she made her way back to the surface, she couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were still watching, waiting for the day when they would rise again. Veros was not truly a dead world. It was a place of ancient power, and the shadows that stirred within it would never truly be silenced. The vastness of space had always been a mystery, a realm that no human had ever dared to explore. For centuries, humans had gazed up at the stars, dreaming of what lay beyond, but the idea of traveling beyond Earth seemed impossible. That was until the moment humanity made the decision to push the boundaries of what was once thought unattainable. The first voyage into the unknown was about to begin, and with it, the fate of the entire species hung in the balance. The Odyssey, humanity's first interstellar ship, was a marvel of human engineering. It was designed to carry a team of explorers, scientists, and engineers on a journey beyond the solar system to a distant star system. The ship was equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created, from artificial gravity to a propulsion system that could take them farther than any human had ever gone. Yet, for all its brilliance, there was something unsettling about the mission. No one knew what to expect out there in the dark expanse of space. The unknown was as much a part of the mission as the stars themselves. Captain Amelia Rios, a woman with a reputation for calm under pressure, was chosen to lead the mission. Her team consisted of some of the brightest minds on Earth, each one handpicked for their expertise and skill. They were eager, ready to embark on the greatest adventure of their lives. But even Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. What would they find when they left the safety of their home planet? What would they encounter in the darkness between the stars? The journey began without incident. The Odyssey launched from Earth's orbit, leaving behind the familiar sights of their home planet. For days, everything seemed calm. The crew carried out their duties, conducting experiments and maintaining the ship's systems. The endless blackness of space stretched out before them, broken only by the occasional flicker of distant stars. Yet even in this peaceful routine, the tension among the crew was palpable. The unknown was always there, lurking just beyond the edge of their perception. As the days turned into weeks, things began to change. Small anomalies started to occur. Unexplained fluctuations in the ship's energy readings, strange signals from deep space that couldn't be traced, and a creeping sense of unease that seemed to settle over the crew. Captain Rios received reports of strange noises in the ship's lower decks, sounds that couldn't be identified. The sensors picked up unusual readings that defied explanation. The deeper they traveled into space, the more bizarre and unsettling their surroundings became. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, as if they were being watched by something invisible, something that was patiently waiting. One evening, as Amelia stood on the observation deck, staring out at the endless void, she felt a chill run down her spine. The stars outside seemed to blur, as though the ship was passing through a mist of some sort. The lights flickered, and the ship's hum, a constant sound that had become a background to their lives, grew quieter, almost imperceptible. It was a sound that should have comforted them, but instead, it felt like a warning that they were no longer alone in the vastness of space. The first real sign that something was wrong came when Lieutenant Erickson, one of the crew members, went missing. It was a routine check, just a simple trip to the lower decks to monitor the ship's engines, but Erickson never returned. A search party was dispatched immediately, but they found no trace of him. His last known location was in the engine room, but the room itself was eerily undisturbed, as though nothing had ever happened. The air was cold, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should have. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of what had occurred, and no explanation for his disappearance. Captain Rios knew then that something had gone terribly wrong. She ordered the crew to conduct a thorough search of the ship, but nothing turned up. It was as if Erickson had simply vanished into thin air. The mystery of his disappearance was just the beginning. As days passed, more crew members began to experience strange phenomena. Some reported seeing fleeting figures in the corners of their eyes. Others heard voices that didn't belong to anyone they knew. The Odyssey itself seemed to shift, its layout subtly changing, as if the ship were alive, adapting to their presence. The ship's systems began to malfunction in increasingly unpredictable ways. Lights flickered, doors refused to open, and the once reliable navigation systems began to display strange, unrecognizable patterns. The crew was on edge, and with each passing day, the tension mounted. Captain Rios, always calm in the face of danger, felt a growing sense of dread that she couldn't explain. Whatever was happening on the Odyssey was beyond anything they had prepared for. The deep silence of space was now filled with something darker, something ancient, and it was watching them. Then, one fateful night, the crew encountered something that they could not deny. The ship's sensors picked up a massive object ahead, something that was not supposed to be there. It was a structure, a colossal, alien construct floating in the void. The Odyssey slowly approached it, its crew staring at the massive structure through the observation windows. The object seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, its surface covered in strange markings and symbols that none of them recognized. The structure was old, far older than anything humanity had ever encountered. It was like a monument, frozen in time, waiting for them to come closer. As they neared the object, the power on the ship surged, and all systems went haywire. The lights dimmed, the engines sputtered, and the once steady hum of the ship became a low, vibrating growl. The crew felt the ship shudder, as if it were being pulled toward the object against its will. The room temperature dropped, and the strange voices in the corridors grew louder, more distinct. It was as if the ship was becoming one with the alien structure, melding with its dark, unknown purpose. Captain Rios made the decision to send a team to board the structure. It was a dangerous risk, but they had no choice. The mysteries of the ship's disturbances, the disappearances, and the alien object ahead were all tied together, and they had to find answers. As the boarding party ventured out, a strange feeling gripped them. The object was not just a relic. It was alive, and it was reacting to their presence. They discovered strange symbols etched into the walls, glowing faintly with an otherworldly energy. As they explored deeper, they found the source of the disturbance, a massive core, pulsating with energy, at the heart of the structure. It was as if the core had been waiting for them, as if it had known they would come. The moment they attempted to access the core, a violent force threw them back. The ship's systems began to fail completely, and the crew realized with chilling clarity that they were no longer in control. The object was not just an alien artifact. It was a trap, a device designed to pull them into its grasp. The ship was lost, and so were they. In that moment, Captain Rios understood. Humanity's first voyage had not only unlocked the mysteries of the universe, but also stumbled upon something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Odyssey was not the first ship to visit this place, and it would not be the last. The unknown had revealed itself, but at a cost. The crew was now part of something much larger, a part of a story that no one could have foreseen. Their fate was sealed, and the only question that remained was how long they would survive in the shadow of the stars. The stars above had always been a symbol of mystery and possibility, but for humanity, they had also become a symbol of aspiration. For centuries, Earth had been their cradle, the only home they knew, but the yearning for something more, something beyond the boundaries of their home planet, had never ceased. And so, humanity began to push forward. It started as a whisper, a dream shared by a few, but it soon turned into a roar, as people everywhere looked up and saw not just a sky, but a frontier. The rise of the human empire was about to begin. The journey into the stars was not an easy one. Humanity had spent decades developing the technology needed to travel beyond their solar system. After the first successful voyage to Mars and beyond, the colonies were established, but it was not enough. They needed more, and they needed it fast. The military was restructured, and vast fleets of ships were built, ready to travel to distant stars, to claim new worlds. The human empire was born not just out of exploration, but necessity. The Earth's resources were dwindling, and the populations were growing. They needed to expand, or they would collapse. The first significant expansion began with the discovery of the Epsilon system, a promising star system located hundreds of light years from Earth. A fleet was sent, led by Admiral Marcus Cole, a seasoned officer who had seen countless battles and was known for his cold efficiency. His fleet was large, heavily armed, and prepared for anything they might encounter. What they did not expect was the fierce resistance of the alien species that occupied the Epsilon system. As soon as the human fleet arrived in the system, they were met by a formidable force. The Epsilon system was home to an ancient race known as the Velrath, a species that had dominated the stars long before humanity had even made their first steps into space. The Velrath were technologically advanced, with warships that dwarfed human vessels and weapons that could reduce entire planets to ash with a single strike. They had watched humanity for centuries, studying their rise and fall, and now they were ready to challenge them for control of the stars. Admiral Cole, however, was not one to back down from a challenge. The first encounter was brutal, with the human fleet barely managing to escape the full force of the Velrath attack. But they had something the Velrath did not: sheer determination. The fleet regrouped, and the war for the Epsilon system began. The human forces were outmatched, but they fought with everything they had. Every battle was a struggle, but with each victory, they gained a little more ground. The Velrath were powerful, but they underestimated humanity's resolve. The human fleet was quick, adaptive, and relentless. Months of fierce combat took a toll on both sides, but it was humanity that ultimately triumphed. The Velrath were forced to retreat, their once mighty empire crumbling before the onslaught of human ingenuity and perseverance. The victory in the Epsilon system marked a turning point in human history. The Empire had proven that it could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful alien races in the galaxy, and the entire universe took notice. With the Velrath defeated, the human empire's influence began to spread rapidly. New colonies were established in the Epsilon system, and the people of Earth began to settle on new worlds. The empire began to expand at an unprecedented rate, and soon it seemed as though nothing could stop them. But just as the empire was beginning to reach its peak, a new threat emerged, one that would challenge everything they had built. In the shadow of their victory, a new power rose, a mysterious alliance of alien races known only as the Consortium. The Consortium was unlike anything the Empire had faced before. Unlike the Velrath, who fought for dominance and pride, the Consortium was an organization of species dedicated to the preservation of balance in the galaxy. They had observed humanity's rise and saw the potential for destruction that the human empire could bring to the galaxy. To them, humanity's expansion was a threat to the fragile peace that existed between the stars. The Consortium's first move was subtle. Small, covert operations designed to destabilize human colonies. Ships disappeared without a trace, entire planets were cut off from communication, and strange, unexplainable events began to unfold. It wasn't long before the human empire realized that they were under attack. But the enemy was invisible, operating in the shadows. Admiral Cole, who had led the empire's military victories, was called upon once again to investigate this new threat. What he found shocked him. The Consortium was not just a group of alien races working together. It was something far more dangerous. It was an ancient force, one that had been manipulating the galaxy's power dynamics for millennia. The Consortium had no interest in conquering worlds. Their only goal was to ensure that no single species, including humanity, could rise to dominate the galaxy. They believed that the balance of power must be maintained, or else chaos would reign. The war that followed was unlike any the human empire had ever fought. The Consortium was elusive, their tactics designed to undermine and destabilize rather than confront directly. The Empire's fleets were stretched thin, and the once unified human colonies began to fragment. Discontent grew among the people, and whispers of rebellion began to spread. Humanity's desire for expansion had brought them into conflict with forces that had been in power for eons, and now they had to fight not just for survival, but for their very right to exist as an empire. As the war raged on, the human empire was forced to adapt in ways they never had before. They couldn't rely on sheer force alone to win this war. The Consortium's knowledge of the galaxy's ancient history gave them an advantage, and their ability to manipulate galactic politics and trade routes made it difficult for the Empire to maintain control. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and the human empire found itself at the center of a cosmic struggle that would determine the future of the stars. Admiral Cole, now a seasoned veteran of interstellar warfare, understood that the fight was no longer about just winning battles. It was about survival. He led his fleet through countless engagements, pushing humanity to the limits of their endurance. Yet, with every loss, they grew stronger. Every defeat taught them something new, something crucial about the enemy they faced. They could not rely on the old ways of conquest. They had to evolve. The Empire had to become something more than a war machine. It had to become a symbol of resilience, a beacon for all who sought freedom in the stars. In the end, the rise of the human empire was not just about domination. It was about survival, about proving that humanity had a place among the stars. The war with the Consortium was not yet over, but humanity had learned a valuable lesson. The true strength of an empire lies not in its ability to conquer, but in its ability to endure, to adapt, and to rise from the ashes of its battles, stronger than before. The rise of the human empire had only just begun, and the galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before, a species that could not be broken, no matter the cost.